The little girl was not supposed to be there. Not in that part of the house. Not at that hour, not barefoot on cold marble floors that had never known the weight of someone like her. But fear does not understand rules. Mama. Her voice was small, softer than the silence that filled the long hallway. She stood there in wrinkled yellow pajamas, one sleeve slightly twisted, a worn stuffed elephant clutched tightly against her chest. One of its button eyes hung loose, barely holding on like it had been loved too much to stay whole. Mama. No answer. The house was too big, too quiet. Too empty. And somewhere inside that emptiness, a child's heart began to panic. At the far end of the corridor, a door opened. A man stepped in. He paused the moment he saw her. Not because she was loud. Not because she had done anything wrong. But because she did not belong in his world, and yet, there she was. Small. Still, looking like she had wandered into the wrong life. Daniel Whitmore had built everything he owned from nothing. Every inch of the towering estate, every polished surface, every silent room, it had all come from years of pushing forward when there was no reason left to try. People called him successful. They used words like powerful, brilliant, untouchable. But none of those words followed him into his house at night. Here, there was only silence, and the kind of loneliness that doesn't ask permission before settling in. He should have said something firm, something corrective. A reminder that staff were not allowed to bring children into the main house after hours. That rules existed for a reason, that boundaries mattered. He knew all of that. He had enforced it before, but something about the way she stood there stopped him. She turned slowly when she felt him watching. Her eyes were wide, not with guilt, not with fear of punishment, just searching, as if she was trying to decide if he could help her. Mama? She asked again. Not to him, but somehow also to him. Before he could respond, hurried footsteps echoed behind her. Lena! A woman rushed into the hallway, breath uneven, fear written plainly across her face. She dropped to her knees in front of the child, pulling her into a tight embrace. I told you to stay in the room, she whispered, her voice trembling between relief and panic. You scared me. The little girl pressed her face into her mother's shoulder. I had a bad dream, she murmured. You weren't there. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, holding her tighter. I'm always here, she said softly, even when you don't see me. Daniel looked away, just for a second, because something about that moment felt too personal to witness. I'm so sorry, sir. The woman stood quickly, her hand still resting protectively on the child's shoulder. Her voice had changed, careful now, measured, controlled. She shouldn't be here. I'll take her back right away. She didn't look at him fully, didn't want to. As if eye contact might cost her something she couldn't afford to lose. Daniel studied her. He had seen her before, of course. She worked in the house. Quiet, efficient. Invisible in the way people in her position often had to be. But tonight she looked different, not invisible, just tired, the kind of tired that doesn't come from work. It's fine. The words came out quieter than he expected. The woman blinked. Sir? I said. It's fine. He stepped forward slowly. Then something even stranger happened. He lowered himself, all the way down, until he was eye level with the child. For a moment neither of them spoke. She studied him carefully. Children don't pretend. They don't filter. They see things adults spend years trying to hide. This is Peanut, she said suddenly, holding up the worn elephant like an introduction. Then, after a pause, I'm Lena. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close enough that it felt unfamiliar. Daniel, he said. She tilted her head. Still watching him, still deciding something. You look sad. Behind her, her mother inhaled sharply. Lena, but he raised a hand slightly. Not to stop her harshly, just gently. Because the child wasn't wrong, and for some reason, hearing it said out loud didn't feel like an insult. It felt like recognition. Maybe I am, he admitted. She thought about that. Really thought about it. As if sadness was something that could be fixed with enough effort. Then she did something neither adult expected. She stepped forward, reached up, and placed her small hand against his face. It was such a simple thing. Such a small, weightless gesture. But it landed like something far heavier. Like a memory he didn't realize he still carried. Don't be sad, she said. I'll come back and make you happy. Her voice was certain. Not hopeful, not unsure, certain. I promise. The hallway went still. Even the silence seemed to listen. Daniel felt something unfamiliar move inside his chest. Not sharp, Not overwhelming, just different. Like something that had been frozen for a long time had shifted just slightly out of place. He covered her tiny hand with his own, carefully, as if it might break. "I'll remember that," he said quietly. Her mother looked at him then. Really looked, and in that moment something unspoken passed between them. Not gratitude. Not fear. Something more complicated than either. She picked the child up gently. "Say good night," she whispered. "Good night, Daniel," Lena said, resting her head against her mother's shoulder. Then as they turned to leave, she added softly, "I'll come back." He didn't answer, not because he didn't want to, but because something told him that answering would make it real. So he stood there, in the middle of a house that had never felt quite so quiet before. Or quite so full, and for the first time in a very long time, Daniel Whitmore did not feel entirely alone. Before we continue, if this story is already touching your heart, don't forget to subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like and share this story, and tell me where you're watching from. Your support helps our channel grow. By the third day, he noticed it wasn't an accident. Daniel Whitmore had a routine. It was the kind of routine that kept everything controlled, predictable, untouched. He arrived home late. He loosened his tie before reaching the stairs. He placed his keys in the same spot. He poured a glass of water he rarely finished. Then he disappeared into his study and stayed there until the night ended. No television, no music, no voices, just work, just silence. But now something had changed. Not loudly, not in a way anyone could point to. Just something. It started with the drawing. He found it on his desk one evening, placed carefully on top of a stack of reports. Purple crayon, uneven lines. A shape that might have been a dog or an explosion. He stared at it longer than he should have. There was no note, no explanation. Just the drawing. He didn't throw it away. He moved it to the side. Then, the next day, there was a flower. A small one. Slightly bent at the stem, as if it had been held too tightly on the way inside. It rested on his keyboard, right where his hands were supposed to go. He stood there for a moment, looking at it. Then, without thinking too much about it, he moved the flower carefully aside, just like he had with the drawing. On the third day, she appeared. He didn't hear her come in, didn't hear the door, didn't hear footsteps. "Hi." Daniel looked up. There she was, sitting across from him like she had always belonged there, feet barely touching the floor, hair slightly uneven. Peanut tucked under one arm, completely at ease. He blinked once, then again. "Does your mother know you're here?" She shook her head. "She thinks I'm sleeping." Something almost escaped him. A laugh. It didn't quite make it out. "You should be sleeping," he said instead. She leaned forward slightly, studying him again. The same way she had that first night. "You should have a friend." The words landed quietly. But they didn't leave. Daniel leaned back in his chair. For a moment, he didn't answer. Because he didn't have one. Not really. Not in any way that mattered. And somehow, she already knew that. Before he could respond, the door opened quickly. "Lena!" Her mother stood there, breath caught somewhere between shock and apology. "I'm so sorry," she began, stepping forward immediately. "I didn't know she left the room. It's fine." The words came quicker this time. More certain. The woman stopped. Her eyes moved from him to her daughter, then back again. "Sir, she's not bothering me." A pause. Then quieter, "She's helping." The words surprised even him. The woman didn't respond right away. She looked at Lena, sitting comfortably across from a man she had warned her never to disturb. Then she looked at Daniel, and something shifted behind her careful expression. Not relief, not entirely, something uncertain. Something that didn't yet have a name. "I'll take her back," she said softly. Lena didn't move. "I'll come back tomorrow," she said matter-of-factly. Daniel didn't stop her, and the next day, she did. It became a quiet pattern. Not announced, not agreed upon, but steady. She would appear in the afternoons or early evenings. Sometimes with another drawing, sometimes with nothing at all, sometimes just to sit. She talked when she felt like it, stayed quiet when she didn't, and somehow, her silence was different from his. His silence had always been heavy, pressed down with years of things unsaid. Hers was light, like she wasn't afraid of it. One evening, she climbed into the chair again, swinging her feet gently. "What do you do?" she asked. He looked up from his papers. "I work," she frowned. "That's not an answer. For a moment, he just stared at her. Then, unexpectedly, "It's not a very interesting answer," he admitted. She nodded, satisfied, then pulled out a crayon from her pocket, and just like that, she began drawing. From the hallway, her mother watched. She had come looking for her again. Heart already racing, prepared to apologize, prepared to fix it, prepared to beg, if necessary. But instead, she stopped at the doorway, because inside that room nothing was wrong. Her daughter sat at ease. The man who owned everything around them sat still, not working, not rushing her away, not correcting, just there, and something inside her tightened, because she understood something that frightened her more than losing the job. This was becoming something fragile, something undefined, something that didn't belong to them. And things that didn't belong to people like her didn't last. Weeks passed, then months. The house changed, not in structure, not in appearance, but in feeling. There was laughter now. Soft at first, rare, almost uncertain, but real. Daniel began coming home earlier, not by much, not enough for anyone to question, but enough for someone who was watching closely to notice. And she did notice. She noticed everything, the way he paused outside the study door now, the way he listened for small footsteps, the way his voice softened when he spoke to Lena, and sometimes the way his eyes lingered a second too long when he spoke to her. She told herself not to see it, not to name it, not to imagine something where nothing could exist. She was an employee. He was not. That line was not thin. It was not flexible. It was absolute. And she had a child to protect, so she stayed careful, even when something in her chest began to feel less steady than before. One evening, Lena looked up from her drawing. "You're not as sad anymore." Daniel glanced at her. "Am I not?" She shook her head. "No, you're different." He didn't ask how, because he already knew. But change has a way of inviting risk, and risk has a way of testing everything. That night it began. A sound, soft at first, almost easy to miss. Then sharper, a cry, from down the hallway. Daniel froze, because he recognized it. Fear, the kind that doesn't belong in a quiet house. He stood immediately, didn't think, didn't hesitate. And as he moved toward the sound, something inside him shifted again. Not slowly this time, urgently. The cry wasn't loud. But it didn't need to be. Some sounds don't ask for attention. They take it. Daniel stopped mid-step, listened again. There it was. A broken sound. Small, but sharp enough to cut through the quiet of the house. He didn't think, didn't question, didn't remind himself that this was not his responsibility. He just moved. The hallway stretched longer than usual, or maybe his steps were faster. He couldn't tell. The door at the end was slightly open. Light spilled into the corridor. And inside chaos. "Please, please, baby." Her voice trembled, not controlled, not careful. Not the version of herself she showed the world. Real. Daniel pushed the door open fully. She didn't notice him at first. Her daughter lay curled on the bed, cheeks flushed, deep red, small body restless against the sheets. Her breathing was uneven. Her hands clutched the blanket like she was trying to hold on to something slipping away. "Lena." Her mother's voice broke again. "I'm right here. I'm right here." Daniel stepped closer. "What's wrong?" She turned. And for the first time since he had known her, there was no composure left. "She has a fever," she said quickly, her words stumbling over each other. "It came on so fast. I gave her medicine, but it's not going down and she's burning. Her voice cracked completely. "I don't have a car." The words came out smaller, quieter, as if admitting that was its own kind of failure. For a second, just a second, she looked like she might say more, like she might ask. But she didn't. Because people like her didn't ask, they managed. They endured. They figured things out alone, even when they were terrified. Daniel didn't ask another question. "I'll get the car." That was it. No hesitation, no discussion, no distance, just action. The drive was faster than it should have been. Streetlights blurred past them in streaks of yellow and white. The road curved and straightened and disappeared beneath the headlights. In the back seat, she held Lena tightly against her chest, whispering, praying, repeating the same soft words over and over like if she stopped something worse might happen. Daniel glanced at them in the rearview mirror, and something inside him tightened. Not pity, something deeper, something closer to memory. A feeling he hadn't touched in years. Helplessness. At the hospital, time slowed. That was the cruelest part. Minutes stretched, seconds dragged. Every sound felt louder than it should. Every silence, heavier. She sat in the waiting room, her hands locked together so tightly her knuckles had turned pale. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door. As if looking away might change the outcome, Daniel sat beside her. Not too close, not too far. He didn't speak because there was nothing useful to say, and she didn't ask him to. For 3 hours they waited, 3 hours of uncertainty. 3 hours of silent fear. 3 hours of a bond forming without words. Then the door opened. A nurse stepped out. She's stable. That was all it took. The woman's body gave in before her mind could catch up. She covered her face, and the tears came. Not loud, not dramatic. Just relief. The kind that empties everything all at once. Daniel didn't hesitate this time. He placed his hand gently on her shoulder, steady, grounding. She's okay, he said quietly. She didn't move away, didn't pull back, didn't correct the closeness. For the first time she let herself lean into the moment. Just for a second. Just enough. When Lena was finally brought out sleeping now, peaceful, small, again. Her mother exhaled a breath she had been holding for hours. Daniel watched them, and something settled inside him. Not loud, not dramatic, but certain. He wasn't outside this anymore. He had crossed something invisible. And there was no stepping back. The drive home was quieter. Not the heavy silence he was used to, a different kind, a shared one. When they reached the house, he stepped out and opened the door for her. Carefully, as if the moment still required gentleness. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was soft, but steadier now. He nodded once. Then turned slightly like he was about to walk away, but stopped. "Her name," he said. She looked at him. "Lena," she answered. He shook his head slightly. "I meant yours." For a moment she just stood there. As if the question itself had caught her off guard, because no one asked. Not really. Not beyond what was necessary. "Marissa," she said quietly. He nodded. "Marissa." The name stayed in the air for a second longer than expected. Then he stepped back. "Get some rest," he said. And this time he did walk away, but something had changed. Not just for him, for both of them, because that night, something had been seen. Not wealth, not status. Not position, fear, care, presence. And once people see each other like that, truly see, it becomes harder to pretend nothing exists. From that night on, Marissa stopped pretending it was just a job, and Daniel stopped pretending he was untouched, but neither of them said it because some things feel too dangerous to name. If you're already liking this story, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notification bell, like and share, and tell us where you're watching from. Your support helps us grow. After that night, nothing was said. And yet, everything was different. The house hadn't changed. The walls were still tall. The halls still quiet. The rooms still too large for the number of people inside them. But something unseen had shifted. Like a door had opened. Somewhere no one could point to. Daniel Whitmore started coming home earlier. Not dramatically. Not enough for anyone to question, but enough. Enough that the front gate opened before the sun had fully disappeared. Enough that footsteps echoed through the hallway while Lena was still awake. And Lena noticed. "You're early," she said one evening, looking up from the floor where she sat surrounded by crayons. Daniel paused in the doorway. He glanced at the clock. Then back at her. "I suppose I am." She nodded, satisfied, as if this was something she had expected all along. Marissa noticed too. Of course she did. She noticed everything. The way he no longer went straight to his study. The way he paused in the hallway, listening. The way his footsteps slowed when he passed their door. And most of all, the way Lena had become part of his day. Not an interruption. Not a mistake. A presence. It wasn't sudden. That would have been easier. It was gradual. Quiet. The kind of change that doesn't announce itself until it's already there. Lena still visited the study. But now she didn't sneak. She walked in like she belonged. And Daniel never told her otherwise? One afternoon, she climbed into the chair across from him, just as she always did. But instead of drawing, she watched him. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Reading." She leaned forward. "That looks boring." For a moment he almost smiled. "It probably is," she considered that. Then nodded, "Okay." And just like that she accepted it. No argument. No insistence. Just presence. It was strange. How easy it became. The silence between them was no longer empty. It had shape now. Weight. Meaning, and Daniel found himself not rushing it. But Marissa felt something else entirely, something tight, something uneasy. Because she understood something Lena didn't. This wasn't permanent. It couldn't be. One evening she stood just outside the study door again. Not by accident this time. She had come looking for Lena, but when she reached the doorway she stopped. Inside they were laughing. Softly, Lena's voice light and bright, Daniel's lower. Unfamiliar, rusty. Like something that hadn't been used in years. Marissa's hand tightened slightly against the doorframe because that sound didn't belong in this house. And yet there it was. She should have interrupted. She should have stepped in, apologized, taken Lena away. Reminded both of them of the line that existed between their lives. But she didn't. She stood there, listening, and something inside her softened, just a little. That was the first mistake. After that, she started allowing it, carefully, quietly, but still allowing it. And that's when it became dangerous. Because warmth has a way of growing, not all at once. Not in ways you can stop. Just slowly, steadily, until it fills spaces you didn't realize were empty. Daniel began staying longer in the evenings. Not working, just there. Sometimes Lena would talk. Sometimes she would draw. Sometimes she would just sit quietly peanut resting in her lap, and Daniel would watch. Not obviously, not in a way that would be noticed, but enough. And sometimes Marissa would pass by, and she would feel it. That quiet pull, that unspoken shift, and she would look away. Because she knew better, she reminded herself often, you are here to work. You are here to provide. You are here for your daughter. Nothing more, nothing else. But thoughts don't always listen to reason. One evening, as she set a cup of coffee on the desk, Daniel spoke. You don't have to rush. She paused. I'm not rushing. You always are. She looked at him then, really looked. And for a moment there was no space between what was said and what was meant. I have responsibilities, she said carefully. It wasn't a rejection. Not fully. But it wasn't an invitation either. Daniel nodded. I understand. And he did. That was the problem. Because understanding creates distance. And neither of them wanted to close it. But neither of them crossed it. Weeks turned into months. The house grew warmer. Not visibly, not in a way that could be explained, but undeniably. And in that warmth something began to take shape. Not quite a family, but something close enough to feel like one. And that was the most dangerous part of all. Because fragile things feel strongest just before they break. One night, Lena looked up from the floor again. You're happy now, she said. Daniel glanced at her. Am I? She nodded. Yes. You're not sad like before. He didn't answer. Because he didn't know how to explain something like that. How do you explain to a child that happiness doesn't always feel safe? That sometimes the more you gain, the more you risk losing? And somewhere deep inside he knew. This couldn't last, but he didn't stop it. And neither did she. It didn't happen suddenly. There was no argument. No mistake. No moment where everything shattered at once. It happened quietly, the way some of the most painful decisions do. Marissa stood in the hallway that morning, holding an envelope. It was light, too light for something that would change everything. Inside it, a letter, an inheritance, a chance. Her aunt had passed away, someone she hadn't seen in years. Someone who had lived far away in a city that had always felt like another world, and somehow she had left something behind. Not a fortune, not enough to transform a life overnight. But enough to rent a small apartment. Enough to enroll Lena in a proper school. Enough to begin a life that belonged to them, not borrowed, not dependent. The kind of life Marissa had been quietly working toward. Since the day she walked through those gates, she should have felt relief, and she did. But beneath it, something else lingered, something heavier. Because building a future sometimes means leaving something behind you didn't realize you had. She stood outside Daniel's study. The door was closed. For a moment, she almost turned away, almost told herself she could wait. Another day. Another week. But she didn't. She knocked. Come in. His voice was steady. As always, she stepped inside. He was at his desk. Papers neatly arranged. Pen in hand, everything in place. Just like always. He looked up. And something in his expression shifted, because she wasn't holding a tray. Wasn't carrying coffee. Wasn't there for work. She was there for something else. I need to speak with you. Her voice was calm, careful, too careful. He set the pen down slowly. Of course. She stepped forward. And for a moment the room felt smaller than it ever had before. I received some news, she said. He nodded once. Waiting, my aunt passed away. A pause. I'm sorry. She inclined her head slightly. She left me something. Not much, but enough to start over. His hand stilled, and for just a second something unguarded crossed his face. Then it was gone. That's good, he said, and the words were true. That was what made it harder. I'll be leaving, she continued. There it was. No softness around it. No way to make it easier. Just truth. Silence filled the space between them. Not heavy, not sharp, just final. When? 2 weeks. He nodded. Of course. He said everything right. That was the hardest part. I'll make sure you have a strong reference. I'll arrange a proper severance. If there's anything you need. He stopped. Because there was nothing he could offer that would change what this was. Thank you, she said. Her voice was softer now. And for a moment she almost said more, but she didn't, because some words, once spoken, change everything. Daniel. The name came out before she could stop it. Not sir, not distance. Just him. He looked up, and something in his expression broke open slightly. You've called me that for months, he said quietly. Don't stop now. The air shifted, just enough to make it harder to breathe. Thank you, she said again. But this time it meant more. More than the job, more than the help, more than the house. It meant everything she couldn't say. He nodded once. But his hands pressed flat against the desk, holding him still. Take care of her, he said. I always will, she turned, walked toward the door. And for a moment she stopped, not turning back, not speaking, just standing there. Then she left. The last morning came faster than it should have. Lena wore her pink coat. Her small boots tapping lightly against the stone path. She found him in the garden, standing under the old tree, hands in his pockets, waiting. I have something for you, she said. She held out Peanut, the worn elephant. The one she never let go? Daniel looked down at it, then back at her. Lena, I can't take that. She frowned slightly. He makes you not sad. The words were simple. Certain. So he should stay with you. Something inside him gave way. Not loudly, not visibly, but completely. He lowered himself to her level. Just like the first night, and in that moment she wasn't just a child. She was the one who had seen him, when no one else had. I'll be okay, he said. She stepped closer, placed her hands on his face again. You were sad when I found you, she said softly. And I made you happy. A pause. I'll come back and make you happy again. I promise. He pulled her into an embrace. Held her tightly, longer than he should have, because letting go felt too much like losing something he didn't know how to replace. From the doorway Marissa watched. Her hand covered her mouth, because some things are too painful to interrupt. When he stood again, their eyes met. Across the distance, and everything that had never been said passed between them in silence. She smiled, because it was the only thing she could give him. And then she turned away. The car drove them through the gates. Slowly, Lena pressed her face to the window, watching the house disappear behind them. Mama, her voice was small. Will we see him again? Marissa looked ahead, at the road, at the life waiting for them, at everything she had chosen. I don't know, she said. And it was the truth, but somewhere deep inside she knew. Some things don't end. They wait. 20 years is a long time. Long enough for a child to forget the sound of her own small voice. Long enough for a man to learn how to live with silence again. Long enough for a woman to convince herself that choosing responsibility over longing was the right thing to do. And yet some things don't disappear with time. They settle, quietly, deeply. And wait, Elena Rivera didn't think about the house often. Not the tall gates. Not the endless halls. Not the quiet rooms that had once felt too large for her small footsteps. She had built a life. A real one. An apartment filled with books and light. A career shaped by purpose. A mind trained to see not just buildings, but the people who lived inside them. She designed spaces now, homes, places where people could belong, and maybe somewhere deep inside that had started there. In a house that had never truly been hers. That morning she wasn't thinking about the past. She was focused, prepared, standing at her desk, reviewing the final details of her biggest project yet. A housing development, affordable, thoughtful, designed for people who needed more than just walls. They needed dignity. She opened the project file. And then she froze, a name, at the top of the page. Whitmore Foundation. Her breath slowed. Her fingers stilled on the keyboard. She read it again, and something inside her shifted. Daniel Whitmore. She hadn't said that name in years, hadn't needed to, but now it was here, not as a memory. As something real, present. She leaned back slowly. And for a moment, the room around her faded, replaced by something else. A hallway. Cold marble floors, a man crouching down to meet her eyes. You look sad, she inhaled sharply. Then reached for her phone. Mom? There was a pause on the other end. Elena? Do you remember Daniel Whitmore? Silence. Not empty, careful. Yes, Marissa said softly. Elena swallowed. He's funding my project. Another pause. Longer this time. Are you okay? She asked gently. I'm fine, Marissa replied, but her voice was holding something together. I'm meeting him. A breath. You should, Marissa said. Elena hesitated. Then asked quietly, did you ever love him? The silence that followed was different, heavier, more honest. I think, Marissa said slowly, that I was very careful not to find out. The building wasn't what Elena expected. It wasn't grand. It wasn't distant. It was warm, lived in, walls filled with drawings, chairs that didn't match, light that felt human. She stood there for a moment, taking it in. Then a door opened, and he walked in. Time had changed him. Of course it had. His hair was gray now. His movements slower, more deliberate. But his eyes, those hadn't changed. She knew them instantly, not by memory, by feeling. He stopped and looked at her, really looked, as if searching, as if trying to find something that had once mattered. And then he did. Elena, not formal, not distant, just her name. The way it had been said once before. Her throat tightened. Hi, Daniel. For a moment, neither of them moved, because the years between them didn't feel like years. They felt like something folded, held, waiting. They sat, talked about the project, about the work, about the people it would help. But underneath all of it, something else remained, unspoken, present. You understand what this means, he said, looking at her plans. Not just buildings, but belonging. She nodded. I grew up in a place that wasn't mine, she said. But someone made room for me anyway. His gaze softened. Your mother, he said quietly. Is she well? Elena smiled. She's strong. She always has been. He nodded. That sounds like her. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't heavy. Can I tell you something? Elena asked. Of course, she hesitated. Then said, I remembered my promise. He didn't move, didn't speak. I didn't know I remembered it, she continued. But when I saw your name, a small smile. Something recognized it. He exhaled slowly. You were 4 years old. I meant it, and there it was. Not childish. Not naive. True. His eyes brightened slightly, not quite tears. But close. You came back, he said. I came back. Later that evening. Elena sat in her car, watching the sunset, gold and quiet. She picked up her phone. Mom? How did it go? Marissa asked. Elena smiled. He's good, she said. Really good. He's been building homes for people who need them. Silence. Soft this time. He asked about you. Another pause. Do you think? Marissa began. I think, Elena said gently, that you've been careful for a very long time. Silence. And careful. Can get lonely. A breath, slow, deep. He kept peanut, Elena added softly. On the other end a sound. Half laugh. Half sob. Completely human. That man, Marissa whispered. I know, Elena said. The sun dipped lower. The light softened. And somewhere in a quiet office, a man sat alone. Not the same man he had been. Not anymore. On the shelf beside him, a small, worn elephant. One button eye. Still holding everything it had been given. Some promises don't fade. They wait, patiently, until the moment they're ready to be fulfilled, and some stories don't end. They simply begin again. Thank you for being part of this journey. If this story touched your heart, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, like, and share. And tell us, where are you watching from? Your support helps these stories reach more hearts around the world and grow our channel.